Many men struggle with allowing fear to control their experience in life. And as men, we need to transcend fear and push past our edge to find ourselves and align to our own authentic self. Today's iconic guest has blown past fear and as a result has won an Emmy Award. Let's find out how this man transcended fear and became iconic. He's an adventure traveler, YouTuber, BBC Emmy Award-winning TV host of Fearless and Far, and filmmaker. He's devoted his life to adventure, conquering fear, and now he helps men conquer their fears through his exclusive retreats all over the world. His name is Mike Corey. Let's jump right in.
All right, Mike, welcome to the Iconic Man podcast. This is the podcast where we find iconic men accomplishing their mission at such a level that it truly is an embodiment of an iconic man that's solely grounded in their purpose. And they embody themselves so well that it's an example for the world and men in the world. So welcome to the podcast, and I'm so grateful for your presence. Please just share about yourself because you've done so many things with your life.
Cool. Well, I got to say that this is the earliest podcast I've probably ever done. Normally it's like 6 p.m., whiskey, cigars, and here we are, 8 a.m. with coffee. But yeah, man, I started off in a small Canadian town, and then from there, what happened is that I started traveling, became a travel YouTuber, and then from there, got really involved in strange and weird adventures. Getting lost in Congo, visiting tribes across Africa, hunting baboons in Tanzania, all of that. And then from there, became a TV show host where I had a TV show on BBC called The Travel Show for a few years. And then a second show after that called Uncharted Adventure, which did 2 seasons, and both were nominated for an Emmy. And the last season, I won the Emmy for Outstanding Host, which is like pretty fucking crazy, honestly.
That's epic.
And now my main jam is my YouTube channel, which has been the jam for a while, but now doubled down after the TV show ended. It's called Fearless and Far, with the premise that being fearless is not a lack of fear, it is a action in the face of fear, that anyone can choose to be fearless at any moment. It's not some state of divine enlightenment, right? So now Fearless and Far is becoming a much bigger brand, it's going off into live retreats and online courses and events and things like this. So for me, I'm super excited to be here with you today to talk a bit more about that, because the more I go down this path of creating content and trying to help people, because it's adventure travel brand. I love travel, mostly as a mechanism for self-discovery. But I mean, I'm a man, you know, and I've been able to figure out a lot about myself through certain things. And while I'm always going to be down to help everybody, like I can help men more, right? Of course, right?
For sure.
Yeah. So now I'm excited to be here today to kind of talk more about that.
The thing that made me so excited about you in your story is the embodiment of your masculinity. And I teach a course that's called the Iconic Man Program. And in the program, I see what men face in their lives and their missions and their ability to lead themselves from their values in an integrated way within their alignment, within their behavior, their language, and their own self-expression. And what I couldn't help but notice is you're just so embodied and true in your delivery of what you do from such a confident place. I wanted to hear about, like, what is it that gives you that superpower?
And tell me what embodied means.
Embodied means we don't have to think about it. It's habitual. It's in our nature. It's who we are.
I think that I know that the best men become what they lacked. So the abused becomes the protector. In my case, the shy becomes the brave. So a man who I think is fully embodied would be one that can swing that pendulum all the way to the other side, because they know what it's like to be in that very disempowered state. And then they have empathy towards people who are currently living in that state, knowing there's only a few little adjustments to the dials to get all the way to the other side. So my story is very much like that, man. Grade school wasn't a good time for me. Got framed in front of the playground. The whole school hated me for something I didn't do for a whole year. And you just suck that stuff in. You know, humans are like paper, man. You fold paper, you can unfold it, but the marks always stay.
I love that.
It doesn't go away. And so going forward, I carried that with me for many, many years. And so with that, I knew, and I still know what it's like to feel completely, not even useless, man, just forgotten about. You know, there's some studies that were done on suicide letters for men. And do you know what some of the most common words, the two most common words in suicide letters for men were? Worthless and useless.
Okay.
So when men ended their lives, those were the two most common sentiments, which are basically the same, very similar words. And that's because I think men exit the grade school, the scholastic system, and they're expected to know all these things, be confident, be a leader, but now, especially in the modern age, we don't have any tools to do that. It's almost we're being pulled in the opposite direction with all of the addictions available, video games, alcohol, drugs, porn, all that kind of stuff. It's like telling men they have to be all these things, but then yet making it almost an impassable maze to be able to get there.
Right.
And so I just, through desperation and being in such a painful place, getting coughed out of the school system, just suffering with self-worth, suffering with confidence, seeing all of these people who I looked up to, and many that I resented only because they were the exact embodiment of what I wanted to become, and just realizing this is not a way to live. I was infected with poison, right? And there's a very strong coping mechanism, which is resentment. If you hate something and it helps you get over it, because I think it's just, you think it's the anti-venom, but it's just more venom.
Right.
And the things you resent in life, they're the things you want, right? And it's like, was it you that told me yesterday? Someone told me yesterday that a hater is just a confused supporter. No, it's my business coach who said that. A hater is just a confused supporter, because every single time you confront a hater, they're like, "Oh, I never thought you would message me back. I'm so sorry. I actually like your stuff so much." And you know, and there's always for me, the longest time on YouTube, I never know who this was, and if you're listening right now, thank you. But there was one person that whenever I posted the video, they would immediately go on the second it was posted and dislike it.
Wow.
Immediately.
They didn't even
it's like full notifications on, bell turned on to go press dislike the second I uploaded a video. And for the longest time, it kind of bugged me. It's like someone hated me so much that they would go and do that, but really they loved me so much.
Right.
So getting back to the whole point of the question here is that because I know what it's like to get stuck in the muck and stuck in the darkness, and I was able to find the right tools through, life beating me around a little bit, getting desperate, finding travel, and through travel, meeting different characters, finding myself in all sorts of sticky situations where I had to rely on myself, my resourcefulness, my confidence to be able to get out of a situation. From there, I've been able to come back to the modern world and take a lot of those lessons and be able to teach them.
I love it.
Because I've been traveling for 15 years now. So with that, again, adventure travel, and it's riding on the back of iron ore trains in Mauritania and roasting marshmallows over the gates to hell in Turkmenistan. Things don't always go well.
And that's what I found, like within the men's experience, right? It's like we have to put ourselves in some form of fire where we get to see ourselves kind of like crumble in a way and fall apart in that fire and rebuild. And so it seems like there are these overcoming crucibles that men have to overcome, but yet at a young age we don't see that this is the way life is. We don't know that lens yet because we haven't yet lived it. And I guess for men that haven't yet seen these things, but yet they're coming, right? Life is happening, and when we hit those obstacles, I guess what tip would you have?
I think you called them crucibles, but there's lots of names for those things, and rites of passage would be another one. And I think men are almost doomed. That's why I have stepped up to try to lead a little bit, because we've gotten rid of rites of passage. And one beautiful thing that I've been able to pick up through my travels is, I would say that, Graham Hancock?
Yeah.
He's a journalist, but goes to all these archaeological sites and draws these conclusions. Had that Netflix special called, I forget, but talking about how the apocalypse happened and all of this. But the reason why he gets so much criticism is because he's a journalist talking about archaeology and how all of these different sites have these common things about the Younger Dryas impact theory and a giant flood, and you see it in the stories, and he's receiving criticism because he doesn't have a degree or a specialization to be able to talk about this. He's a journalist, but he's writing books about archaeology, so archaeologists freak out. Ancient Apocalypse was the name of the documentary on Netflix. Well, docu-series or whatever it is. But so with that, he's been able, because he's traveled to all of these different sites, draw similarities between them. Where if you're an archaeologist and you're studying Egyptology, you're always in Egypt, obsessed. You're not thinking about what happened in Indonesia or Mexico or any other of these old sites. But the fact he had a very broad spectrum view and visited all of the sites, he was able to see all of the similarities between all of these ancient places, where an archaeologist wouldn't, because they get hyper-focused. For me, I do have a biology degree, but what I've been able to do is travel to like 90 countries and hang out with some of the furthest away tribes and people in the world. And so I've been able to, while I'm not an anthropologist, see how all of these people, I have data points from every reach of this planet, and I see similarities. So if you're only studying one thing, you can learn a lot, but you don't understand how the big web of things work. So because I've met so many interesting people around the world, there's a lot of commonalities I've found amongst all of them. So if tribes in Siberia and the Amazon and Congo all do one thing together, like they're so far apart, there must be something there that relates to the human experience or the need to have that. And one of those things, man, is rites of passage, especially for men, especially for men. Basically, every tribe has some sort of difficult thing for men to go through, men or women, but generally men, to be able to become a man. And we've thrown that away. So if that's one of the most important things for a man to be able to be embodied, right? To find out what it is to be a man, and we've gotten rid of it, no wonder we're all lost and confused, bro.
Right.
Because that's like, when does a boy become a man, right? There's no defining line. You can say, when your wife has a baby or something, right? But I mean, that's harder for her. That's more of a rite of passage for women. When your father dies, that would be one, but that happens hopefully when you're 50s, 60s, and older.
Right.
So now we're a bunch of men with no rites of passage, being thrown out with a ton of distractions and no guidance, and no wonder everyone's so fucking confused.
Seriously.
It's
true. And I've experienced that in my own journey too. It's, we look naturally to our father, and some fathers are not there, unfortunately, or they don't necessarily know how to lead from their masculine core and show their son that rite of passage and how to get through it, but yet let them get through it in their own authentic way. And what I found is powerful is to be able to have a perception and a context in our mind as men going through this experience that sets us up for success, to have an awareness that there are rites of passage and we actually need them, rather than having that avoidant pattern or that coping mechanism to try to let's lessen the severity of this feeling right now, right? Rather than, no, let's go right through the center of it. And that's what I've noticed in your adventures, is you go right through the center of the cave, right? And that's the power of, I think, focus and our ability to be in our masculine energy, where when it hits us, this rite of passage, we don't turn away from it. We go through it as a man. And I guess, what would be your biggest rite of passage that you've experienced, if you don't mind sharing?
It was travel. And I didn't even know that I needed it or wanted it. It's funny, they even got rid of college hazing, right? Streaking, beating each other with like soap and socks, like the Full Metal Jacket movie, whatever it was.
Yeah.
It's all gone because some guy dies or something happens. And yeah, like, it's sad that people die, but at the same time, even that in itself was a rite of passage,
right?
Like, you hang out with your boys, you get punished. There's a system there of hardship, whatever, and suffering, and it could be alcohol even.
Yeah,
but
for
even
sure.
You get hungover enough, man. It's suffering.
Absolutely.
And
good old fraternity hazing.
Exactly. And so, I guess for me it was travel, but again, I didn't consciously know what I was doing. I hit a point in my life, it was after college, where there was like a trifecta of shit. It was a really bad breakup. There was my first death in the family, my grandmother, and also I crashed my car. And I was just in this point of like desperation again. And that was also mixed with this feeling of, again, inadequacy, where I hadn't quite gotten to the point where I am now. I was still suffering from some of the same childhood wounds. And then with that, in that weak spot, I had a friend come to me and say, hey, there's this opportunity to volunteer in Indonesia. Do you want to come? And I was like, I've never been there. I don't know what they eat, don't know what they speak. And like, don't worry, man, me and you against the world. Like, we'll save up money, we'll do it. And so it was me and him against the world. We were saving up for like months and months and months, doing like these volunteer things and fundraisers. Got enough money to pay the deposit. It was like $3-4 grand. We were texting like, all right, man, I'm going to go pay the deposit. It's me. And you're going to be there later? Yeah, no, I got to take care of this thing. I'll see you in the bar after. So I go and I drop with my shaky hand like the $4 grand to pay the deposit, to lock myself into a ticket for 4 months in Sulawesi, Indonesia.
Wow.
Not even Sulawesi, an island off an island no one's heard of, Sulawesi. But I had my buddy, you know, like me and him against the world. Anyway, so maybe you can figure out where the story's going, but I paid the deposit and I go downstairs, text my man, I'm like, yo, man, paid it. And then silence, and like 40 minutes later, yo, you coming? Silence. And he flaked. He's like, oh, sorry, bro, couldn't get the money together after all, had to give some of it to you. And so I was locked in for a 4-month adventure in the middle of fucking nowhere. And this is the most crucial part, I think, of this whole roller coaster I've been on, is I was so scared to get on that plane. I'm from New Brunswick, Canada. No one really travels the world there. I get on the plane. My parents were supportive, but we were all very nervous. I remember looking out the window of that plane, waving goodbye and being like, I'm probably, like, there was like a mutual thing, like, we're probably never going to see each other again, you know what I mean? Because where the hell was I going? And they were supportive, but no one had ever done anything like it before.
Yeah.
And so I get over there and I get off the plane, and there's like shit in the streets and smog and scooters and tuk-tuks and just chaos, and I was so freaked out, and I had to meet this group at the bus station, and there was a couple other scared white tourists there with like their new Columbia shirts and their nails done and their hair gelled, and we got picked up in this like rickety old truck and like bounced around the barrios of this town in Indonesia, put on a boat, ended up on this island with probably 10 scared kids. And everyone was afraid because no one had been there before. And it was this island paradise where at night there was fireflies that would go in the bushes, and there was a giant starry sky, and we were scuba diving 3 times a day, helping scientists with their research, like coral reef assessments and things. And with that, you show up and you, again, had all this gear, all this stuff you needed, that the packing lists and everything everyone was obsessed about. And then we were there for 3 months. And so what you see is everyone shows up, and the cool kids were like cool, and then after like a week, you're not. There's no mirrors, by the way. No mirrors, no running water. You can't, like, if your physical appearance was important to you, you can't maintain it. Again, no water, no mirrors.
Yeah.
Can't see yourself.
Right.
And it switched everything. So the cool kids with all their fancy, expensive North Face clothing or whatever, Patagonia.
Yeah.
And they had put all of their work into the external experience their entire life, external appearance. They couldn't rely on that. But the kids who were bookworms, bug nerds, musicians, they kind of became the cool kids. It was kind of like a flip of the societal system. And in that moment, when we didn't need anything, just some bare bone basics, I realized that everything I was afraid of was unfounded, completely unfounded, that my fear, this bone-shaking fear that I had, was not real, and that the world didn't have to be this place I didn't fit into. Because I loved animals, and here we are in this world where every single day we were studying animals and doing research and recording data, and I loved that world. I was really genuinely interested and had obsessed about bugs and crabs, and I became like kind of cool because I knew everything about that in this whole different world. And all I had known was this oppressive school system where I was nervous to even make a peep, and here I was, people were coming to me to ask me for, what bug this was.
Right.
And I felt so cool. Imagine going to a party in Canada. No one gives a shit about what bug it is. So that just made me realize the whole different world out there, that I didn't have to participate in what that bubble was. And then I just traveled and considered that this experience was me breaking my world lens, where I had this world lens and it was given to me as a child, as we're all given a world lens, and we see the world through it, and we have a religion and a certain thing we eat, a certain thing we do, and then this trip just smashed it wide open, fragments everywhere. And then for the next 15 years, I just began traveling and picking up different fragments of my lens to forge a new one to see the world. And that's where I am today. But I had to pick up different pieces, different worldviews, different attitudes, different beliefs to make that the one I have today. And through that, now I can clearly see the world. Because back then it was blurry. It was out of focus. I couldn't see my spot because I had the wrong lens.
Right.
But through travel, I've been able to reforge it and finally accurately see my place in the world.
That's amazing, man. I love it because it captivates the power of context and our ability or inability to see the world from, I guess, truth when we have that old lens on, right? Like, I love that analogy with out of focus. Didn't know my place.
Yeah.
Without that lens being broken, it's hard to see without knowing what is there. And what I've noticed, men, is we come into the world, right, from our perception of our upbringing, and we think that we need to be a certain way in order to have quote unquote success. You know, we see Uncle Steve, he's crushing it. Oh, well, he did that and that made him successful. Well, what's my place in the world? It's like in our family unit, it's like, well, I was born into this family. What's my place in this family? And we kind of acquiesce to our context until we see it otherwise, and that's when it breaks. It allows us to see our belief system from another angle, and it gives us an access point to evolve as a man. And what I've noticed is in my coaching of men and my Iconic program is that when we see this lens and it starts to get fragile or break, our belief systems are starting to collapse. And when the beliefs collapse, our psyche starts to get a little shaky. And that's when we start to, in my experience, judge my experience. This is getting bad. This is rough. This is an emotional experience. Oh my God, I'm experiencing fear. What do I do? And what I've noticed is when the pain tolerance gets so high and I reach threshold, I start to ask the right questions. And when I've asked the right questions, I start to get the right answers. And then that evolutionary process starts unfolding. But what I've noticed is that without vulnerability, that transformation doesn't necessarily get started because the ego is holding on, right? And so what I love about your story is that the travel was the leverage. It like shoved you into that flame. And an analogy I love is the best samurai sword was forged in the hottest fire. And with being a man, it's so important, like you said, that rite of passage to embrace that truth. And there is nothing that will pull us out of it. Because I've noticed a lot of men, they look for the answer to make this game easier. There is no answer, right? And when that forge is set with the sword and the steel is strong enough, but yet soft enough to cut through the air and cut through whatever it's cutting through, there's a balance between the strength of the masculine and the open heart softness of the feminine. And we're right in the center. And we can energetically move in any way to navigate life. And that's what I've noticed in your embodiment is you have the strength, you have that strength of the samurai sword, but yet the softness and the open heart of a man that's embodied in a way that you can navigate life more freely, and so that those crucibles or those rites of passage may not be as big or as detrimental because you can navigate now. And so this brings me to my next point is I notice you have a freaking awesome compass on your chest. And for me, that represents like a guidance system. What would you say that resembles for you in terms of a guidance system?
Yeah. The compass for me is... I've always liked compasses. I didn't really know why for the longest time, but they became a symbol of my life just recently when I realized that fear is a compass. And that we spend most of our life avoiding what we're fearful of, when the reality is we should be going towards it. And so now I really treat fear like a compass. And people always get at me. It's like, oh, should I jump off a cliff? But you know, like you know when you're acting out of fear. You know when your bullshit is getting in the way. And if you don't, and you have no idea, then you got to spend some time journaling, and you got to reevaluate your childhood wounds, because all of that inner child work will point directly to all of your bullshit now. If you're jealous, if you're angry, if you fight for control, if you're a perfectionist, it all goes back to what happened when you were a kid. Every single time, man. And it's almost spooky that when you really start to analyze yourself a certain way, and you're like, oh shit, maybe I do really like resent rich people. Then you trace that right back, and you're like, actually, fuck. Like, I don't value myself, and therefore I don't think that I'm worthy of fancy things.
Right.
And I think through travel, I was able to look at the world more objectively, because there's no right or wrong. There was many times where I was in Madagascar, for example, and I heard that deforestation was destroying this endemic jewel, right? Madagascar, there's so many creatures that are only from there, right? Like lemurs and leaf-tailed geckos and a lot of chameleons. They're only found on Madagascar. And so you hear about these people, deforesting the forest, and you picture some guy with like a, grungy like mustache and a gold chain. He's like hacking down hardwoods, selling them on the black market, like heartless. And you get there and you meet one of these people illegally logging, and it's the biggest sweetheart who has like 6 kids, because there's no contraception there. And the soil is so poor that he grows 1 rice field, and he can have maybe 3 crops, and then he has to cut down more forest to feed his children, or else they're gonna die. And you have to ask yourself, well, shit, if I had 6 children and they were gonna die if I didn't cut down some forest,
Right.
I'd probably fucking cut down some forest.
Let's
I wouldn't
get
be
to work.
stoked about it, right? But I'm not some evil dude doing it because I want a Rolex, right?
Right.
And then you realize the world isn't so black and white, that like everything is a shade of gray, and that right and wrong sometimes aren't so, there's not so much contrast. And you take that back to your own life, and you're like, shit, well, maybe everything I think could be wrong or right. And
Right.
you're never so easy to pick a side, like maybe you feel a certain way, but let's think about why or how or when. And these questions all become very fluid after a while. And when you start really analyzing yourself and being able to understand why you act certain ways, oh my God, it gives you power over your life. Because a lot of us face depression, anxiety, 2 things that I feel like I've dealt with in my life as well, but I've realized that both of those are just undiagnosed fear.
Right.
There's something creeping in the back of your mind, some feeling of inadequacy, some pain that you haven't drawn the lines back to why it's there, and it's just haunting your life, right? Trying to drag you into the swamp, and it knows, it's trying to protect you, number one. It's not malicious, but it knows the swamp is where the plant grows, right? You have a seed's got to be in muck, in the ground where it's dark and slimy and muddy. And that's where the seed is planted. It spends some time there, right? You don't plant a seed and it grows in a minute. It
Right.
spends days, weeks, months in the ground, in the fucking filth. And then, only then, when it's time, it'll grow. Human soul's exactly the same way, man. Exactly the same way. So I kind of forget where we started with all this, but for me, you just speak a bit about the masculine and feminine experience, right? Like, I, for the longest time, thought that I was a bit afraid of this woo-woo, embody your feminine kind of stuff. I'm very real and cut the bullshit from all the years traveling. Like, I always want to go to the core of authenticity first. And there's lots of, like, let's say, conspirituality along this stuff, where I've been to some men's circles, and I just didn't feel it was that helpful. It was a bunch of feminine men talking about how men should embody their feelings. And I'm like, cool. Well, I don't feel like you've even embodied your masculine.
Right.
And you're just going to a safe space where there's no masculine men, because masculine men are intimidating. And so you can all be a bunch of feminine men talking about your femininity. Whereas I feel that if you can embody your masculine, only then can you have a healthy relationship with your feminine. And from there, some interesting things happen. Like, let me tell you something I struggled with a lot. Was PDA, public displays of affection. Because I had a bit of a weak upbringing, I had this idea that I wanted to look tough, right? And from there, when I started dating my girlfriend now, she was a big PDA fan, and she's very feminine. And I think because I started to understand my masculinity, I attracted a woman who was more feminine. But she always liked PDA, and I was kind of always against it. And I really had to think about why I was. Again, if you're really against something, I wouldn't say I was resentful, but there was a definite discomfort there for me. I had to really do a self-inventory. Why?
Right.
And it's because I didn't feel like it was masculine, right?
Yep.
However, through this relationship, I realized, no, man. And I understood why the feminine side of a man can be a massive advantage. Is you should be able to commit acts of violence as a man if you have to,
Absolutely.
right? You should be able to be sharpened like a weapon and be able to use that, but you should also be able to soften, to be able to meet a woman and give her what she needs affection-wise. I think either I created this image of weakness associated around affection. I don't know where it came from, but now I feel like the ultimate embodiment of a man is being able to turn it on, the man side, when they need to, but also be able to soften and be with a woman who is feminine and give her the affection that she needs without having a barrier there, without one interfering with the other. But I don't think you can be that second one unless you have fully embodied what it is to be a man, right? And that's there's not very many people encouraging men to do that today.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely. No, I love your share with that, because if we look at levels of consciousness, right, there's about 8 levels if we look at a particular model, one being fear-based survival living. And then we go up and we might look for self-actualization. We might look for, I need to be successful as an entrepreneur. And then we get to like more of a worldview lens, like I'm here for everyone. And then it might be like a soul, more spiritual perspective. Everyone is love. And through this evolution, we go from the me phase of the man, which is all ego, right? Which that doesn't have that heart-centered approach at all. It's more of that selfish, I'm really feeling not enough and not worthy so much that I'm trying to control my experience and rip it out of life. And then the next phase is the spiritual. Okay, well, that old model didn't work so badly that it crumbles in the face of truth. And then we go into the feminine. We turn on our masculine almost in a way because it caused so much dissonance in our experience that we start to look at the feminine and start to be able to be emotional. The heart starts to maybe open a little. And we start to, like you're saying, that evolution starts happening. I'm looking at my behavior authentically now, and we're transitioning into that authenticity, maybe a little more than once we did. And less out of that rigid approach and more of that, oh, well, there might be a way to look at myself, actually. And when we go to that place, we start to embody the feminine. But that's when the woo-woo, right? Let's go bang drums and say we're masculine when we're really not that embodied. And then the next evolution is the divine masculine, more of that embodied where we don't turn on either. And we embrace it all so much that we see the light from more of a truth perspective. And this is my perspective of it. And so I guess my question is how would you recommend that men embody an open heart? Because I feel like that strong, oh, I'm a badass, it doesn't give us access to our heart in an authentic expression where I'm in love with myself. I'm in love with my authenticity. I don't really mind when people don't like me, but I'm going to shoot my arrow without fear of judgment or fear of ridicule, which I think you've done.
Yeah, I think that I think the solution is that you have to fully go man mode.
Right.
And what I mean by that is I think that the majority of men these days are too feminine because there's that quote, the hard times makes easy times, whatever it is, right? Where men are just too soft now. We haven't had anything to push through. Our fathers haven't either.
Right.
So we're in soft times now. We got soft men. And with that, we're more raised by our mothers, more, again, apathetic or like more lethargic. We're not out there. There's no big cause to fight for. There's no big war. There's no big depression, right? In Fight Club, they say the big depression is our lives.
Yes.
And that's so true. And hard times do make hard men. And right now, it's no wonder there's very few people who are really, really out there who have nailed it.
Right.
So what I did and what I try to preach is go full on. Like you're already erring on the side of being too feminine. Go full masculine, right? Like go take Muay Thai classes. Fight a guy, you know, get punched in the face, punch someone in the face, right? And then from there only, I think when you realize you're capable of violence, are you able to then create peace? Because the most dangerous men, are the ones who are completely disempowered, who are fully in their feminine, who are in relationships, maybe they had a bad one with a protective mother or something, or then they get into a toxic relationship with their girlfriend, they have no power in their lives, they ended up beating their girlfriend, just finding their aggression and power, fighting the feminine, and it's the worst expression. You're never going to find someone who's fully embodied their masculine beating their wife.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Never.
So it's mostly these disempowered guys who haven't found power in their own life, haven't been able to express that power in their own life. They're the ones shooting up schools, man. They're the ones, like choking their girlfriends. It's not the guys who have really found the power and been able to lead in their own life. So I also think travel, for myself, it was travel. It was jumping on that plane, going to the other side of the world. And I understand that's not easy. Like I feel blessed that life treated me so shitty that month that it gave me the desperation to do something that was so uncharacteristic. The human soul is just so easy to fall into a rut, and we're never going to change. If things are okay, they're fine, they're good. That is the biggest curse.
Seriously.
It's good, fine. Things have to be terrible or awesome, right?
Yeah.
And awesome, we're going to live a ecstatic life, but terrible will change.
I love that. It's like insinuating that the quality of our standards sets the quality of our experience, and either I'm going to live an epic experience or I'm going to go to the depths of hell and come right back out of the depths of hell and own it. And I guess my next thing is you just have so much fun in what you do. I've seen so many videos of you online and in my studies for preparing for the podcast, and you just have so much fun. You're just living on the edge, squeezing every last drop out of that lime. And so I'm curious, how do you have so much fun without being in your head about your experience? Because I see a lot of men going into their own judgment, rational thinking mind. Am I enough? Am I, we, like you said, we get lost. And so how do you have so much fun and just rip it wide open and just don't give a shit about anything,
I would think the number one thing people can do to have more fun and also be able to become more embodied is just follow a passion. And trust that where there's fire, you'll find everything you want. Like, I was a break dancer for 10 years.
Nice.
I spent more time break dancing in college than I did studying. I was like a D student, man. I had to do like a victory lap, failed a bunch of classes.
Yeah.
And I never thought that break dancing would be such an important part of my life. And even now, like, I don't, the only time I throw down now is when people make me do it at weddings, mostly. But what I didn't realize is through breakdancing, I was able to work on this idea of being comfortable in front of a group, because you're up there and people are watching you and you have to perform, but you're not speaking, right? And one of the first things they teach you in breakdancing is called the b-boy stance. You know what that is?
No.
So the b-boy stance is when it's like this thing. Bah!
Okay.
And it's this, like the exclamation mark at the end of a sentence. So you go, you throw down, you do your things, and you always end in a stance.
Okay.
Like the punctuation.
Like a powerful posture pose.
And they teach you, even when you mess up, you always end in the stance.
Okay.
So if you do a move, and obviously there's lots of mistakes because you're spinning on your head, and you smash your knee, Peter Griffin style. Doesn't matter. You smash your knee, you get up, pah. And the reason why you do that is because people don't even know what the hell's going on most of the time. And if you acknowledge your mistakes, then people will, oh, he messed up. You fall, you hit your knee, you limp away. They're like, oh, he messed up. But if you hit your knee, you jump up, and you're like, fuck yeah, then people are like, oh shit, like that was crazy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he pulled out of it. Look at his embodiment of his own
Well,
confidence.
they wouldn't even know you made a mistake.
Okay.
Right? Because it could be a move. They don't know the moves. Right? And then I learned the same thing for everything in life. Public speaking. You see someone go up there and be like, oh shit, my slides, I lost my slide, and I lost my place, and everyone's kind of like, awkward.
This is getting weird. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, but if you just go up there and let's say you lose your spot, and you're like, fuck. And you like walk around and you like look like you're thinking for 5 seconds.
Right.
Everyone kind of go like, what's going on?
Yeah.
And you pick back up and they're like, oh, he looks confident almost because like he's picking back up and like nothing happened. But they're going to think you meant to do it.
Right.
No one cares.
Just building anticipation, the silence.
Exactly. And he has the confidence to sit there in silence. Yeah? Meanwhile, you could be shaking in your shorts, man. But it's just that, and that attitude, that almost like fake it till you make it attitude, is the most valuable tool going forward. And one thing that I've realized now is self-image is a massive part of ending up where you're going to end up. Self-image is this thing that we never really think about, but we always think about. It's always working on our self-conscious, always putting the fence to what we can do. And people always ask me, especially talking about YouTube, because the channel's gotten quite big now, like, what would you, like, to get 1 million views on YouTube or 1 million subscribers, what would you, like, how do you do that? And what I say now is, especially if you have a hard time doing videos, sit back. Don't necessarily practice making videos. You have to do that. But visualize you practicing. Visualize you having fun, having success, kicking ass. You know, visualize you having the camera roll and you are just being the most pure, authentic version of yourself. I think that's just as valuable as pressing record and failing and stumbling and stuttering your way through where you're from and what your name is. Because most people, speaking to camera is so hard, right? It's not easy.
Right.
But it's also because they don't see themselves as being successful at it.
Right.
And now it's a tool that I use all of the time is visualizing myself doing something that maybe deep down I don't feel like I really can do, or I don't see myself doing. But then moving that fence in my mind before doing something always seems to make it happen, right? Or show up more comfortably, or whatever it be. And so going back to the question of how do you have more fun, it's like I didn't think that breakdancing would be a big thing in my life. But again, getting me in front of a group, solving that problem, also solving the problem of connecting with remote tribes and people. One thing I'm most famous with is going to these remote tribes where they speak click languages often, or something that I can't speak at least, but still being able to connect with these people. And it's because, again, going back to what I said, how there's these commonalities between everybody. Dance. Everywhere dances.
Yes.
There's rites of passage everywhere, and also every single person on this planet, especially in these faraway places, there's always a song and dance. Because that's how humans have expressed themselves forever. That's why we still can't get Backstreet Boys out of our head or Hit Me Baby One More Time. All these years later is because our brains are so tuned into hearing stories through song and dance. Because again, if you're an African tribe meeting another one 1,000 years ago or 100 years ago, how can you show who you are, where you're from, and the values of your people? It's through song and dance, right? That's the only way to do it.
Right.
And so breakdancing allowed me to visit these tribes and show up and not be fearful to just throw down some dance moves.
That's awesome.
Or learn theirs. Yeah. And that's the #1 icebreaker every single time. And again, these passionate things, whether it be dancing or kite surfing or macaroni pitchers, bro, I think having fire towards something is such a rare thing for us. You should follow it every single time. It might seem silly, it might seem like a waste of time, but if you're really excited to do something, I think you should dive in to the fullest extent and see what's there. And there's another famous quote, it's like the dots always connect looking backwards. It's so true. And how do you have fun? It's by doing things you like. And I was terrible at speaking until I started speaking about things I actually liked. And I almost thought it was this strange spell I was under, where most of my life I was terrified to speak in public. And then one time someone asked me to give a talk about travel and personal development like 10 years ago. And I did. And it felt kind of fun. And oh my God, is it such a big surprise that when you actually talk about things you like, it's actually quite pleasurable, right?
Yeah.
Whereas in grade school, it's like talk about the French-Canadian history of Canada. And you're like,
You're
you
like,
just
really?
struggle your way through it, right?
Seriously.
Passion is just such this fleeting thing for humans, man. I always encourage, no matter how silly or a waste of time it feels, if you're passionate about something, dive in. And luckily, in this world of content creation, of personal development, you can do a podcast, and then you can do, you know, YouTube videos, and then you can do interviews, and then you can do photography. Like, there's just a giant spectrum of angles you can go that kind of all push you in one direction.
Right.
So that's what it's been. Just kind of, I think I have mild ADHD.
Me too, for sure.
So I can just kind of push a bunch of different directions, and I feel like I'm doing different shit, but it all kind of, or I find a way to kind of funnel it into one river that then pushes me downstream, you know?
I like that because, you know, your degree is in biology, and, you know, you were focusing in ocean preservation. And then you go on this travel trip and you're like, holy crap. And you talk about travel and you're like, I love this. And you had the ability to pull on a full-on Audible and just follow what you found interesting and fun. And that's what I guess what I'm seeing in the thread of your share there is the tendency for us as men to think that we need to follow the program. No, I just got this degree. I need to go be a biologist. Why? Why? It doesn't light you up, maybe.
It didn't, no.
It didn't. Okay. And so what I found is that men tend to stick to those rigid old programs instead of letting themselves unfold into the experience. And that's what I think, in my perception of you, is that gives you the ability to have so much fun. You just love going and doing what you have fun with rather than being stuck. And so that's powerful. And I guess in that it's being able to break dance in front of the tribe and going and being a break dancer and just trying everything, having that ADHD. And, you know, it's like, in my experience as a man, I love having ADHD, but I also love to focus on my mission. And so I guess having that ability to be balanced with it, because if we don't have the ADHD, how are we going to find out what we love in this life?
Man, that's such a good point. I think we're so quick to diagnose and medicate all of these different conditions, when really it's just modern man crying in desperation for variety and challenge.
Yes.
We've got these incredible puzzle-solving organs in our skull that we're not giving adequate puzzles to. Right?
Yeah.
It's meant to find food, recognize patterns, get ready for winter, you know, hunt, notice how the leaves are different here, and follow that for the gazelle. Like, we're constantly trying to solve problems, and that's why we've dominated the earth, right? But now we have no struggle, and our brain will always create struggle. Every time I see like a hater just dropping filth on one of my videos, I'm like, we just need bigger problems, man. You know, we just need bigger. If there was bigger problems, that we wouldn't be creating so many silly problems in the world today.
I love that. I guess one of the things I was curious about within the research was not many men get to go to indigenous, like raw tribes and see other men in action. How do they express from their own masculine energy? How do they hold themselves? Like, is it more stoic? Is it just more rigid? Is it just a full on freedom of expression? Because being in a tribe, right? We are. I mean, I can only imagine. They just haven't been exposed to this new world, and so there's got to be something archaically living in that tribe within their own way of being that I'm curious about.
In basically every tribe I visited, gender roles are still alive and strong, where men do one task, women do another, and that it varies a little bit from culture to culture, but that's quite prominent, and it doesn't seem to be a problem. In the world today, I think we've been able to blur those lines. I would say that it probably would be for the worse. I think there's definitely circumstances in which gender roles can be, like adjusted, but you can't deny human psychology and biology. Like there's certain roles that are better for women and certain roles that are better for men. Not every man, not every woman, of course, but where our minds work very differently. And when you date someone who is a polar opposite of you, as terms of like masculine, feminine, like the yin yang, you realize your brains are very different about what you think about, right? Like the concerns, the problem solving ability, it's very different. And I guess I wonder in the world today where the right line is. And you can't look back at these tribes and say they're right or wrong, but there is commonalities that I see around the world, like I had mentioned. And one thing I've realized too is that the let's say the joy that you would see in a tribal atmosphere is directly dependent on how much suffering they have done. The most depressing tribes I visited are the ones who have been abused and taken advantage of by a modern world, where, for example, in Ethiopia, there's all sorts of wonderful tribes in the Omo Valley, the big lip plates, and that's where these are from. And there they have the Omo River, and for the longest time, these tribes lived on the banks of the Omo River. Some were hunter-gatherers, some were more agriculturalists growing food. But now they've been damming this river, and they've been forcing all these tribes into encampments, into reservations. And there, alcohol creeps in, things like that start to become a big problem. There's drought, they can't get enough food because they want to, again, block a river for hydroelectric power for the cities, right? And there things can get very dark. So the tribes that I visited that have been the most joyous have been the ones who are still living free in the forest, like the Hadza, for example. You know what I mean? The Hadza are the ones who hunt baboons that got quite famous in Tanzania. They're out there, they're cracking jokes, they're like farting and laughing and like just smoking pot and being like living their best lives. They have a hard life, by the way. A lot die by 50 by dysentery or something else from drinking bad water. There's black mambas in the bushes, man. Like, it's not an easy life. They run all day long through jungle thorns that tear up my arms and legs. You try to follow those boys for a day, you're exhausted, aching, covered in cuts, you know, with a rolled ankle. But they love it. Like, that's what we're meant to do, you know, run and jump and have a purpose and get things, you know. Whereas like another local group of people I visited in the Andes, up in the very high slopes, with low oxygen, with hard winters, there's not as much joy there. Life's a different hard slog, right? And they're not living as traditionally as perhaps they used to be. So yeah, it's interesting to visit some of these people, but over and over again, the ones that are the most joyous, the ones who have a purpose, that they're out there doing something every single day, and also adequate food and water. And generally when you don't have adequate food and water, it's because the modern world interjected and messed up your life.
For sure. So I know you're doing retreats now. I'd love to hear more about that. Like, what was your intention with it? What are you looking to bring to the world with it?
Yeah, so they're called Tribal Rites retreats.
Okay.
And they're a new thing. This will be the first one we're running in about a month and a half from now, mid-March. And the idea is that change only happened in my life when I was able to be in physical circumstances in which I had to change. The human mind and body doesn't do a good job just watching YouTube videos. We talked about this a bit before we started recording, where it's not as simple as waking up in the morning, watching a Jordan Peterson, you know, like top 5 things men need to do when they're 20, and then changing everything. For most of us, it's being in the thick of it with our dirt on our hands, learning. And I would say that is the best way for 90% of men to learn, is with dirt on their hands, right? Getting work done, action, action, action. We're too passive, we're too calculating, we're too perfectionists, you know, sitting back and trying to wait for the perfect time. There is no perfect time, right? I think one tenet of masculinity that isn't talked about that often is it's action, act, attack, right? And not in the idea to cause harm, but just that move. We need momentum. We gotta move. We gotta keep things going. You know what I mean? And in the movement, in action, like that, I feel like that's the cure for depression, man. I'm very quick to fall into a place of apathy sometimes when I don't act. But if I can keep movement in my life, something new, record another video, make something as an artist, as a creative, that always seems to fix the problem. When I sit back and like, I don't know, play a video game or something like that and eat junk food, it just spirals. You know?
Right. Just
But
starts
action is always the thing that cures these things in my world. So, yeah, the idea of this retreat is to be able to take these principles, these things that I've learned from the different tribes around the world, the things that have worked for me in the past 15 years of figuring my life out, my journey from shy, introverted dude to where I am now, like Emmy award-winning adventure travel TV host. All of these skills, these tools, these ideas, these beliefs, these activities, all funneled into a 6-day, 5-night retreat here in Mexico with my adventure companion who's a local guide here. We're going to be going into cenotes, these underwater sinkholes, caves, there'll be bones, there'll be all sorts of fun surprises. And I'm stoked because ultimately I think for most people, once they get their shit figured out, the number one thing they want to do is give back. And I think it's because you can't give until you feel like your cup's at least half full. Right? But everyone who's able to fill their cup to a certain level is like, shit, I just want to help people. And that's why I think humanity is not doomed. Right? We're the doomsday idea now where everything's, the world's going to end. And nah, man, humans at their core are generous, loving people. And I think that's going to always be what saves the world, right?
Yeah.
You see it over and over again. Someone achieves so much money and fame, and they just want to give back.
Yeah.
Every single time.
I love that. Yeah, it sounds powerful because your adventure stories, your cave adventures, going to these other countries, and then bringing that experience right here in Mexico, going into the cenotes, and creating that similar experience for your guests.
Yeah.
That's epic. What would you expect your attendees to leave with in their experience, like as like an integrated transformation?
The hard thing I have with these retreats is that people look at me and they assume, and this was myself, I made this a mistake as well, that they look at the content I make and they assume the people who watch my videos are the badass adventurers out there doing all the things. But the reality is the people who are doing all the things, they're not generally watching that much adventure content. They're probably out there doing adventures, right? And my biggest fans are the ones who haven't quite taken that first step yet, who aspire to be that. And I look at my own life, and yeah, I often watch people who I like to aspire to be. And so when people look at this retreat and they look at my content, they're like, oh, this is going to be a crazy adventure where we're going to be like eating raw goat liver. And I'm not saying it's not going to be on the menu. But what I'm saying is that I'm making this retreat for people who are looking to make that first step. I'm not trying to make it this big, inaccessible, challenging adventure where you have to be Indiana Jones to make it through. You know what I mean? What I'm making is the experience I wish I had 15 years ago.
Yeah.
When I was just starting off, I hadn't done many adventures. I didn't quite have the confidence or the awareness to even know what I needed at that point, right? And with that in mind, I've taken all of these things that I had learned and picked up and had worked for me and put them together in this week with the idea that people who even haven't left their country before will be able to come and have the most powerful experience possible. I'm not looking to break people necessarily. I want to have some challenges that pop up, and everything's optional, so you don't have to do anything, but have an encouraging group of people and facilitators there to be able to be like, all right, so this seems like it's a little bit challenging, like a sweat lodge, for example, something you see in many parts of the world. How can we get through this together, right? And you got a band of brothers here, right? We can help you. Let's talk about like the physiology of it all, what happens in the body, and then with that, let's jump in and try your best, you know?
Yeah.
Try your best. That's all you can ever do is try your best. You don't have to always be on top. Like one thing I think that adults especially get wrong is what failure and success is. As you grow up, you just have more and more data points of what success is. And if you fall short of that, of being the best, or being good at something, you won't even try because you don't want to fail. Because we all have these wounds of failure. We all have these memories of one time we didn't get the gold medal, we were last, and then it hurt us, and we felt that this either vocal or silent judgment from our peers, and now we stay away from failure forever. You're in complete control what failure and success is in your life.
And we define it, right?
Totally, right? You can decide that standing up in front of a group and, stuttering and saying your name wrong and peeing your pants is success in public speaking, knowing that 99.9% of people who are terrified of public speaking wouldn't have even gone up to start with. And if you think about it, that is a success, because that's the first step to becoming world class at it.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, I didn't pee my pants in front of a group, but I wasn't too far from it. It was a basic phobia of mine, right? And I still remember the first few times I was up there, where I did a talk with a group called Toastmasters, which is quite a famous public speaking group. And it was so funny because I signed up, and then I drove there that day, and I parked my car outside, and I was sitting in the car rationalizing why I couldn't go in. Oh, I feel a little bit sick today. I don't want to give people the flu. Oh shit, it's gonna be 2 hours and I have to wake up early. I probably shouldn't go in. And the instructor knocks on my window and it's like, hey, are you Mike, the new guy who was supposed to be we started a minute ago? I'm like, fuck. So I got pulled in.
I gotta go.
And I didn't know that you had to speak on the first day. And so they made me speak on the first day. They pulled me up. And I probably wouldn't have even pulled in the parking lot if I would have known. And I had to give a 1-minute talk, and I think I just blacked out. I don't even remember what I said. All I remember is that there's someone there with a clicker, and every time you use a crutch word, so they hit the clicker. Click,
Right.
and I remember seeing the clicker click, 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 click. And I did my 1-minute presentation, which I was not prepared for. So imagine what that was like. And then everyone gave me a standing ovation. And that moment just changed everything, because that was a success. Stuttering my way through a 1-minute presentation where I probably said half the shit wrong, don't even remember what I said it but the whole time. The success was just getting in that fucking building, honestly.
Yes.
Right?
Getting yourself in the room, right?
And then, because everything's optional. I could have left, right? I could have ran away. I could have went to the back. That was the success. And that's where we get it wrong, is that we don't want to look bad these days, because we see so many data points of people being successful, especially now with social media, all day long. Look how successful this 21-year-old is. He's got a fucking Bugatti, boom, boom.
Right.
And then so we think that we have to have that, or we don't even try. Nah, man, but you got to keep pushing it, and you have to define the success in your life, right? And if you can do that, then you can do anything. Because again, standing up there, recording one video like this, that's a success. Even if no one watches it, even if people hate it, that's the first step towards 1,000 steps to becoming world class at something.
Absolutely. Man, this has been epic. I'm so grateful for your time, and I'm sure the listeners got so much from this. How can your fans or the listeners following in find you, and how can they find your retreats?
Yeah, man. So Fearless and Far is the online alias. Again, fearless not because there is no fear, but because fearlessness is an act in the face of fear. That's where it comes from. So Fearless and Far is the online brand, and then YouTube is where the action's at. The channel has 2.5 million subscribers now. Adventures all over the world. One I'm posting this weekend actually is a tribal question and answer with a tribal leader in Zimbabwe. This guy named Mpisi, who wears all gazelle skins, and going back to one point about how hardship for men is really important and challenge. And we were talking a bit about this, him and I, because again, he's from a tribe, and luckily he spoke English with a heavy accent, but I was able to communicate quite well. And we're talking about challenge and hardship for young men. He goes, oh, in my tribe, we just take the babies and we swing them. We swing them.
It's so raw.
I loved it.
Oh, it's amazing.
And then I tried to flip it. I'm like, so MPC, do you have any questions for me? And he looks at my arm, which is sacred geometry and stuff. And he's like, why are you so flowery? And I loved it.
That's great.
So some fun stuff there, yeah. And for the retreats and everything like that, you can go to fearlessandfar.com/trips.
Nice.
Or my website, right? And it's all there.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, if any of the men or even women listening want to embody their masculinity more, you can go to pathtoclarity.com, and the Iconic Man program will get you there in 4 weeks. Thank you for your time, my brother.
Thank you.
Mike Corey here, Emmy award-winning adventure travel host. Bravo.
Thanks, man.
Thanks,
Fun.
I hope you really enjoyed how Mike used travel to transcend his own fears within his life. Remember, brother, it's really important for us to build our own rites of passage, just like Mike did, so that we can transcend our own fears, where we embody our feminine and masculine energies naturally, living with an open heart in our own authentic, natural self-expression. If you like this show, please click like and subscribe and share it with a friend and comment in the comments below. Remember, the more we transcend fear, the more we become iconic. I'll see you in the next episode.